My phone rang at 3 in the morning. It was my granddaughter, crying. "Grandma, the man in my room is back again. He's smiling." I ran to her room immediately. I found her alone, but she was pointing at the closet. I opened it. There was nothing there. I sat on the bed to calm her down, and then I heard a noise from under the bed, and when I bent down to look, I froze at what I saw. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story of revenge from. I want to know how far it has traveled. The ringing of the phone pierced the dead of night, sharp as if it were tearing through the calm. I woke with a start, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it was trying to escape my chest. At 68 years of life, I'm no stranger to sleepless nights, but this feeling was different. Who would call at this hour, at 3 in the morning? The biting chill of the old house in Oak Haven, North Carolina, seemed to seep into every one of my joints as I stumbled out of my room, my feet trembling on the cold hardwood floors. I picked up the receiver, and the weak, shaky voice of Clara, my little granddaughter, echoed in the darkness. "Grandma, the man in my room is back again. He's smiling." I felt my heart stop. A cold fear washed over me from head to toe, making my skin crawl and leaving me too weak to stand. Clara, barely 10 years old, spoke in a tone filled with panic, like a cornered little animal. I tried to stay calm, whispering, "Clara, I'm here, don't be afraid, sweetheart." Even though I was trembling too, I ran upstairs, each step creaking on the old floorboards as if they were screaming along with the anguish that was choking me. Clara's bedroom door flew open. The dim yellow light from her lamp cast strange, distorted shadows that seemed to dance in the darkness. The little girl was curled up on her bed, huddled in a corner, her face soaked with tears. Her big eyes, which always sparkled like stars, were now dull with fear. Her small, trembling hand pointed directly at the old oak wardrobe in the corner of the room. Seeing it, I remembered when Clara was just a baby, how she loved to hide in there to play hide and seek with me, laughing with that crystal-clear voice that filled the house. Now, that same spot had become a terrifying corner for her. I approached, taking a deep breath, trying to control my own shaking. I threw open the wardrobe doors with a bang that echoed through the room. Inside, there were only a few dresses hanging, some dolls with empty stares, and several stacked boxes of toys. No one was there. I sighed in relief, but only for a moment, because Clara's voice, broken by terror, spoke again. "I saw him. I saw him go in there when he heard your footsteps." Her tears fell one after another, like little daggers in my heart. I wanted to scream at her that no one was there, that it was all a product of her imagination, but looking into her wide, terrified eyes, I knew this was more than just a nightmare. I turned back to her, sat on the edge of the bed, and wrapped my arms around her. Her small body was shaking uncontrollably. Her hair was damp with sweat, stuck to her forehead. I gently stroked her head and whispered, "It's okay. It was just a bad dream. I'm here with you. No one can hurt you." I said it in a low voice, but deep down, I didn't know if I was trying to calm her or myself. That room, once filled with her laughter, now seemed devoured by the darkness. I held her tighter, trying to transfer a little warmth from my tired body, hoping to dispel her fear. Just then, a sound was heard, a scratch, very faint, but in the absolute silence of the early morning, it sounded as sharp as a knife. My skin crawled and I went rigid. I motioned for Clara to be quiet, squeezing her shoulder tightly. I felt my heart sink into my chest, beating so violently I could hear the blood pounding in my ears. I strained to listen. That sound, soft but unmistakable, seemed to be coming from right under the bed. An invisible fear was strangling me. I didn't want to look, I didn't want to know, but I had to, for Clara. I knelt down slowly, my knees groaning in pain as they touched the floor. My eyes tried to adjust to the darkness. The dim light from the nightstand lamp fell on the cold tile floor. And then I saw something. A small, shiny object, lost in the gloom. My whole body froze, my breath caught in my throat. I could only remain motionless, staring at that object, not daring to move. In that moment of terror, memories from years past flooded in like a slow-motion movie, dragging me back to the days of pain and hope that had woven themselves into my life. I remembered clearly that first night when Jessica, my daughter, came running to my house, carrying Clara, who was just 7 years old. It was pouring rain that night, water running in streams down the dirt road leading to my house. Desperate knocks on the door woke me with a jolt, and when I opened it, I saw Jessica standing there, soaked, her hair stuck to her face, one cheek swollen and purple. Clara was hiding in her mother's arms, her huge eyes filled with fear, her lips pressed tight to hold back sobs. "Mom, I can't take it anymore," Jessica sobbed, her voice breaking. "Kevin," he hit me, again. I hugged them both tightly, feeling my heart break. I brought them inside, lit the fireplace to warm them, but the cold inside me wouldn't go away. Kevin Miller, Jessica's ex-husband, had once been a hard-working construction worker with a wide smile and bright eyes. When Jessica fell in love with him, I thought my daughter had found a good man. But then, with unstable jobs and days without contracts, Kevin started to change. He sought refuge in alcohol, in gambling, and he took out every loss on his wife. The arguments that were once just words turned into punches and slaps. Once, when I went to visit her, I saw Jessica in the kitchen, trying to hide a bruise on her arm and forcing a smile so I wouldn't worry. But I knew. I saw everything. I begged her to leave him, but she just shook her head. "I don't want Clara to grow up without a father, Mom." Until that night, when she just couldn't take it anymore. That day, Kevin had come home drunk, smashed the glass coffee table, and hit Jessica in front of Clara. The little girl, so small, had screamed and clung to her mother's legs to protect her. That was the final straw. Jessica took her daughter and ran to my house, and this time she didn't go back. That marriage ended with a crumpled divorce paper, signed in a hurry on my kitchen table, under the dim, yellowish light. I looked at my daughter, just past 30, her face marked by pain, and at Clara, who, instead of playing happily as she should, flinched at any loud noise. The three of us started a new life in the old house in Oak Haven. That house, where I had lived my whole life, became a refuge for 3 generations. I went back to the farmer's market with my food cart, selling homemade pies and hot coffee every morning. The smell of cinnamon, the sizzle of butter in the pan, and the greetings from neighbors were the only things that kept me going. Jessica got a job as a waitress at a small diner in town. The work was hard, the pay was next to nothing, but she would say, "As long as Clara and I are safe, Mom." We struggled. But every night, sitting together over a simple plate of macaroni and cheese and listening to Clara talk about school, I felt a relief in my heart. As long as the girl was smiling, as long as Jessica no longer had to hide bruises, I felt grateful. One day, Jessica met Arthur Vance. He appeared like a ray of sunshine in the middle of gray days. He was an elementary school teacher in the town, tall and thin, with dark hair neatly combed and a slow, calm voice. The first time he came to the house, he brought a bag of fresh apples from his orchard, and I saw Jessica's eyes light up. A spark I thought had been extinguished long ago. "Mom, he's so good," Jessica told me, her cheeks flushed as she talked about Arthur. "He started coming over often, sometimes to fix the faulty wiring in the kitchen, other times to bring Clara an old book or some candy. I still remember the day he sat at the table, patiently explaining to Clara how to solve a math problem, his voice gentle. "Try breaking it down into small steps, Clara. It's not hard." The girl, who was always so shy, smiled for the first time after getting a calculation right. Seeing that, I felt a strange warmth in my heart, as if after so many years of storms, my family was finally finding some peace. The neighbors started to notice. Brenda, the woman who ran the produce stall next to mine, would joke, "Eleanor, your daughter got lucky, finding a teacher that good." "Arthur sure is a decent man." The whole town praised him. They said he was a respectable man, a dedicated teacher who always organized free tutoring for the poorer kids. Hearing those comments, I became convinced that Jessica and Clara had found a safe harbor. I began to dream of days where the family was united, without fear and without tears. Arthur slowly became part of the house. He liked to sit on the front porch with the cup of coffee I served him and talk about his students, about his dream of building a small library for the town's children. I enjoyed listening to him. I liked the way he always smiled gently when he spoke of the future. "Ma'am, He said to me one night, as we both watched the moon hanging in the North Carolina sky, "I want to give Jessica and Clara a good life." I nodded, smiling, thinking that my daughter had finally found a man who valued her. Just a year after they met, Arthur asked Jessica to marry him. He knelt in my living room with a simple silver ring in his hand and with a trembling voice said, "Jessica, I can't promise you the whole world, but I do promise to spend my life loving you and taking care of you and Clara." Jessica cried, hugged him tightly, and from the corner of the room, I let silent tears fall. They weren't tears of sadness, but of joy. I thought that maybe God had heard my prayers and had given my daughter and granddaughter a good man. The wedding was simple, at the old town church. The whole place was filled with laughter and blessings. Arthur's colleagues came in droves. Everyone raised glasses of bourbon, toasting the perfect couple. Clara, in her little white dress, scattered flower petals down the aisle with a radiant smile, as if she had never known a day of pain. After the wedding, Arthur came to live with us. I gave the large bedroom to the newlyweds and moved into the small room next to the kitchen. I didn't mind. As long as I saw Jessica laugh and Clara play peacefully, I was content. The first few days, everything seemed perfect. Arthur maintained his calm demeanor, always helping around the house, from fixing a leaky faucet to painting the peeling wall in the backyard. He also used to sit with Clara, teaching her to draw or telling her stories about heroes from American history. Seeing that little family, I thought that after so many storms, we had finally found peace. However, strange signs began to appear, like ripples on a calm lake. During the day, I noticed a change in Clara. The girl, who used to be radiant and would sing nursery rhymes while playing in the yard, now became eerily quiet. Whenever Arthur entered the living room, Clara would immediately lower her head, clutching the hem of her dress so tightly her knuckles turned white. She would shrink, like a little bird trying to become invisible before a hawk. I could clearly see the tension in every gesture, but what broke my heart was her gaze. They were no longer the clear eyes of a child, but eyes filled with shadows, as if hiding a secret far too big. Once, Arthur sat on the armchair, with that gentle smile I once believed was sincere, and asked, "How was school today, Clara? Does your stepdad need to help you with anything?" His voice sounded kind, but I saw how Clara shook her head forcefully, her lips pressed tight, and then ran to the kitchen, hiding behind the wooden door. I stood there, watching her little back retreat, feeling as if someone were squeezing my heart. I tried to talk to Clara, hoping she would open up to me. One afternoon, while we were both on the porch, I gently took her hand and asked, "Clara, tell me the truth. What is it that scares you? You can tell me, I'll protect you." But she just lowered her head, her eyes filled with tears, and mumbled, "I don't know, Grandma. I'm just scared." Her voice was so low I had to lean in to hear her, and the way she pressed her lips together, with that look full of dread, stopped me from pushing her further. I just hugged her, stroking her soft hair, while inside me, the unease began to grow into a thick mass, like a storm about to break. One day, I came back from the market earlier than usual. The sun wasn't high yet, and the air was still cool, but as I entered the house, a strange feeling washed over me. Everything was unusually silent. Only the ticking of the wall clock could be heard. I called for Clara, but there was no answer. As I passed the hallway that led to her room, I saw Arthur standing right in front of Clara's door, one hand resting on the wall and the other fiddling with the ceiling light fixture. He was startled to see me, though he quickly smiled naturally. "This light keeps flickering, Eleanor. I thought I'd change it so the girl can study with more light." I nodded, trying to stay calm, but in his eyes, that flash of nervousness that appeared for a second before he regained his calm expression sent a chill down my spine. Why was he there, right then, when no one else was home? That question began to drill into my mind relentlessly. The following night, I woke with a start when I felt the sheets move. Clara, in her thin pajamas, had secretly climbed into my bed, trembling like a dry leaf in the wind. I hugged her, noticing her ragged breath. "Grandma," she whispered in a low voice, as if afraid someone would hear her. Tonight that man was in my room again, standing in the corner. He was just there, smiling, watching me the whole time. He even touched me. "I'm so scared, Grandma." Her words were like a knife in my chest. I held her tight, forcing myself to speak calmly. "It was probably a dream, Clara. Tomorrow I'll fix up your room. I'll put some candles in there to make it feel warmer. How about that?" But inside, I knew it wasn't a dream. The way she trembled, the way she clung to me as if I were her only refuge, prevented me from deceiving myself any longer. I stroked her hair, humming a lullaby I used to sing to her as a baby, while my mind spun endlessly. Who was this man, and why was Clara so terrified? One night, passing by Clara's room, I caught a glimpse of a shadow slipping behind the curtain through the crack of the slightly open door. My heart skipped a beat. I pushed the door open abruptly, but I only found Clara sitting on the bed, hugging her knees, her eyes wide with terror. "Who did you see, Clara?" I asked immediately, my voice trembling. The girl shook her head as tears rolled down her cheeks. "The man." He was smiling again. I checked every corner of the room, pulled back the curtain, opened the window, but there was nothing, only the shadow of the trees swaying in the wind. I hugged Clara and calmed her down. "It's nothing, my love, just the shadow of a tree." But deep in my heart, I knew something wasn't right. That shadow, even for just a moment, had made my skin crawl, as if it brought with it a dark premonition. I started a habit of getting up early, sitting on the porch with a cup of cold coffee and watching in silence. Every morning, just as the sun rose, I would stay there, my eyes fixed on the front door. I noticed that Arthur often got up in the middle of the night. Once I heard his stealthy footsteps in the hallway, then the soft creak of the kitchen door. When I asked him, he always had a reasonable excuse. "Thirsty, Eleanor?" "Oh, I heard a strange noise in the yard and went to check that the back door was locked." His voice was calm, but I began to notice small details. One day, I saw him standing in the yard, not checking the door, but looking up at Clara's bedroom window. When I approached, he turned immediately, pretending to fix the fence. His smile, which had once given me confidence, now felt cold, like a mask that was too perfect. The loose pieces were starting to fit together in my mind. Clara's fear, the times Arthur lingered near her room, his nightly excuses. It was all like a terrifying picture slowly revealing itself, but I didn't want to believe it. Arthur was a teacher, respected by the whole town. He had helped my family in our hardest times. How could he be the source of Clara's terror? And if he was, what had he done to make the girl so terrified? And now, as I leaned under the bed, the dim yellow light from the lamp barely illuminated a corner of the cold tile floor. I held my breath, reached my trembling hand into that dark space, and my fingers touched a hard, shiny object. When I pulled it out, I felt my heart stop. Arthur's cell phone, with its gleaming silver case, was there like a silent accusation. I recognized it immediately. It was the phone he always carried with him, either in his jacket pocket or on the dining room table. Why was it there, under Clara's bed, in the middle of the night? That question was like a stab wound that left me breathless. I glanced at Clara, who was still huddled on the bed, her eyes red, her little hands gripping the sheet. I quickly hid the phone in my hand, not wanting her to see it. I was afraid that just the sight of it would make her terror overflow. I stood up, walked around the room, checking everything again as if to reassure myself. The window was still locked, the latch cold under my fingers. The curtain moved slightly with the wind coming through a crack, and suddenly I understood that the scratching sound that had made my skin crawl was just a dry branch hitting the glass. A chilling coincidence, as if the house itself were trying to deceive me. I returned to Clara's side, sat on the edge of the bed, and, trying to keep my voice steady, I said, "It's nothing, sweetie. It's just the wind. I'll stay with you tonight, okay?" The girl nodded weakly, snuggling against me. I held her, feeling every shaky breath from her body. I quietly sang her an old lullaby, like when she was little, but my mind was in chaos. The phone in my hand felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, and every passing second plunged me deeper into a terrifying doubt. I waited until Clara's breathing became regular and her eyes closed. Only then did I dare to stand up. I left the room, the phone still clutched in my hand, and every step felt like lead. As I was going downstairs, I was startled to see Arthur coming out of the living room. He rubbed his eyes, pretending to be sleepy, and in a low but cold voice asked, "What's going on, Eleanor?" I heard noises upstairs. I hid the phone in the pocket of my robe. My hand was soaked in sweat. I felt as if he could see right through me, as if he knew I had the proof. I forced a smile, and with a shaky voice, I answered, "It's nothing, Arthur. Clara must have had a nightmare." I calmed her down, and she went back to sleep. He scratched his head and gave a faint smile, but his eyes, those eyes I once thought were sincere, now sent shivers down my spine. "The girl's been having a lot of bad dreams lately," he said in a flat tone, though I detected an icy edge in his words. "I'll talk to her tomorrow." I nodded, feigning normality, but inside my heart was roaring like a stormy sea. If he was sleeping in his room with Jessica, as he usually did, then why was his phone under Clara's bed? That question burned like fire, incinerating all the trust I ever had in him. I went back to my room, locked the door, and with trembling hands, I took out the phone. The screen was black. Maybe the battery was dead. I sat motionless on the edge of the bed, looking at it as if it would speak on its own, as if it would reveal the truth to me. But it remained silent, guarding its secret. I couldn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, eyes open in the darkness, listening to every sound in the house, the ticking of the clock, the wind whistling through the crack in the window, and even stealthy footsteps that perhaps I only imagined. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the curtains, drawing faint rays on the floor. Arthur's phone, locked away in a drawer, was still there, reminding me that I couldn't postpone this any longer. I knew I had to act. I had to protect Clara, even if it meant breaking everything apart. Inside me was a storm of fear and rage, but above all, determination. I was not going to let my granddaughter continue living in this horror. I gathered all my courage and called Evelyn, my best friend, a psychologist in the town center. Her voice was as gentle as ever, but I noticed the concern when I told her, "Evelyn, I need your help. Clara, the girl isn't well. I want you to see her." I didn't tell her the details. I didn't dare speak of the phone or the suspicions that were eating me alive. I just said that Clara was having nightmares and that she needed a professional to help her. Evelyn agreed immediately, asking me to bring her to the office at noon. When I spoke to Jessica, I had to choose every word carefully. I sat across from my daughter in the kitchen, trying to keep my voice as normal as possible. "Jessica, I've noticed Clara's been having a lot of nightmares lately. It's probably the stress from school. I want to take her to a therapist so she can sleep better." Jessica, who was pouring coffee, looked up in surprise, but then nodded. "If you think that's what's best for her, Mom, then do it. I worry about Clara, too." I sighed in relief, but just then Arthur came out of the living room, frowning with an annoyed tone. "Why take a kid to a psychologist, Eleanor? People will talk. Clara just needs to go to bed early and not watch those horror movies." He laughed, but his smile didn't reach his eyes, and I felt a chill run down my spine. I forced a smile and replied, "I'm just worried about the girl, Arthur. I just want her to be able to sleep peacefully." He shrugged and turned away, but his gaze as he passed me was so cold that I had to clench my fists under the table to stop them from shaking. At noon, I took Clara's hand and led her to Evelyn's clinic. The girl walked slowly, her little hand cold in mine. I tried to tell her funny things, to remind her of the days we used to pick apples in the backyard, but Clara just kept her head down without responding. Seeing her like that, I felt my heart being squeezed. The child who once chattered nonstop now seemed like a shadow. Evelyn's office was cozy, with pastel-colored paintings on the walls and a soft scent of lavender in the air. She put on some quiet instrumental music and offered Clara a mug of hot chocolate, smiling. "Clara, have some hot chocolate. It smells delicious." The girl accepted the mug, but just held it in her hands, her gaze fixed on the floor, clinging to me as if she was afraid I would leave. Evelyn didn't rush. She sat in front of Clara and spoke in a soft voice, like running water. "Clara, do you want to tell me about your dreams? I'm here to help you. No one is going to blame you." Clara didn't answer. She just squeezed my hand tighter. I rubbed her back and whispered, "It's okay, my love. Grandma is here." But inside, I was scared. Scared she wouldn't talk, scared I had made a mistake by bringing her, scared I wasn't strong enough to face the truth. Evelyn, patiently, took out some crayons and white paper and placed them in front of Clara. "If you don't want to talk, do you want to draw? You can draw what scares you, or whatever you want me to know." I saw Clara's small hand tremble as she picked up a black crayon. She began to draw, stroke by stroke, as if each line was pulling out a piece of pain. On the paper, a dark room appeared, with a small bed, and in the corner, a tall, faceless shadow, with only a twisted smile. Clara's tears fell and stained the drawing, each drop like a drizzle blurring the lines. Evelyn looked at the drawing and asked gently, "Clara, who is this man? Did he say anything to you?" The girl nodded, her voice tiny, barely audible. "He told me that if I told Grandma, she would die." Those words were like a knife, stabbing me in the chest. The glass of water I was holding fell from my hand, shattering into pieces on the floor. My entire body felt numb, as if the blood had stopped flowing. I wanted to scream, to ask Clara, "Why didn't you speak up sooner?" But seeing her pale little face, I understood she had been carrying that fear alone for far too long. Evelyn looked at me with eyes that mixed compassion and firmness. She continued speaking to Clara, her voice still soft but now filled with determination. "Clara, you are very brave for drawing this. Do you want to tell me more? Your grandma and I are going to protect you." The girl hesitated, looked at me and then at Evelyn, as if fighting with herself. I took her hand, squeezed it gently, and whispered, "I'm here, Clara. Speak freely. I won't let anyone hurt you." Finally, after more than an hour, with Evelyn's patience, Clara burst into inconsolable tears and clung to me. Her voice erupted, as if all the fear she had held in for so long came out at once. "It's my stepfather. He comes into my room every night. He just stands there, smiling, and he touches me. I'm so scared, Grandma." Clara's words were like an earthquake that shattered everything inside me. I was frozen, holding her small body, feeling every one of her tremors. In my mind, hundreds of needles were piercing me, a sharp pain. I wanted to scream, to curse Arthur, to run and confront him right then and there, but I knew I had to stay calm, for Clara. I swallowed my tears, trying to keep my voice from breaking. "I'm here, my love. I will never let him hurt you again." But inside, I was boiling with rage. Arthur, the man I trusted, whom I considered a savior for our family, turned out to be a demon in disguise. Evelyn took my hand with a firm gaze. "Eleanor, we have to call the police immediately. This cannot continue." I nodded, my heart pounding wildly, trembling with fear but also burning with fury. That afternoon, I led Clara by the hand to the police station. She clung tightly to me, her eyes red but no longer tearful, as if she had exhausted them all in therapy. I stroked her hair and whispered, "I'm here, my love. Everything is going to be okay." Although deep down I wasn't sure. How could I face the entire town, where Arthur was seen as a hero, a respected teacher? The police station was at the end of Main Street, an old building with white walls that had turned yellow with age. As I pushed the door open, a smell of old paper and tobacco hit me. We were met by a middle-aged, pot-bellied police officer with a wrinkled uniform. He was sitting behind a desk and looked at us with tired eyes. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady, and began to tell him everything. Clara's nightmares, the phone I found under the bed, and finally, the girl's heartbreaking confession in the therapy session. I placed Clara's drawing on the desk and pointed to the dark, deformed silhouette. "This is what my granddaughter has been seeing. She didn't make it up. I need you to investigate him immediately." The officer, whose name tag read Riley, listened while yawning, as if what I was saying was nothing more than an insignificant complaint. He raised an eyebrow and said condescendingly, "Are you sure, ma'am? Kids have big imaginations. Maybe she saw some horror movie and then had a bad dream or made it all up." His words were like a slap in the face. I felt the blood rush to my head. Rage erupted uncontrollably. I slammed my hand on the desk, making the papers jump. "The girl is not making anything up." I found Arthur's phone under my granddaughter's bed myself. He had no reason to be there in the middle of the night. Officer Riley let out a dry laugh, a smile full of contempt that made me want to scream. Maybe he just forgot it there, he said in a monotonous voice. It's normal for a stepdad and a stepdaughter not to get along, ma'am. You shouldn't be so quick to blame someone, especially not a man like Professor Vance. The whole town loves him. I was so furious my body was shaking, my hands clenched into fists. Clara, beside me, clung to the sleeve of my blouse, her small body trembling. I felt my granddaughter's fear, and that hurt me even more. This is a formal complaint, I said with a firm voice. I demand that you file a report right now. Riley sighed, picked up his pen reluctantly, scribbled a few lines on the paper in front of him, and closed the file. All right, we'll look into it, he said, but his tone showed he wasn't taking it seriously. But let me tell you something. Don't stir up more trouble. Your daughter's husband is a respected teacher. Don't make a scene over nothing and ruin someone's reputation. His words were like a bucket of cold water. I stood there, feeling the small spark of hope I had flicker out. I wanted to scream, to force him to act, but seeing Riley's indifferent gaze, I knew I was up against an invisible wall. Leaving the police station, I felt like the whole world had turned its back on me. Clara took my hand, walking in silence, her eyes downcast. I was about to cross the street when something turned my stomach. Arthur, in a crisp white shirt, was standing in the police station's parking lot, his arm around Officer Riley's shoulders, talking casually. He clapped him on the back, and the two of them laughed heartily, like old friends. I froze, my feet rooted to the ground. He already knew. He knew I had come, that I had reported him. I quickly pulled Clara away, trying to block her view, but Arthur's triumphant look, that quick flash as he turned towards me, was burned into my mind. It was like an icy warning. You can't touch me. That night, when we got home, the atmosphere felt heavier than ever. Jessica was in the kitchen making dinner, the aroma of pot roast filling the house. She looked up as we came in and asked with concern, "Mom, where did you take Clara all day? I called you and you didn't answer." I stammered, looking for an excuse so she wouldn't suspect. I took her to the doctor. She was feeling a little under the weather. But before I could add anything else, Arthur appeared from the living room, with a twisted smile and a voice that was sweet, yet sharp. My mother-in-law is so dramatic, isn't she? The girl keeps making things up and ends up embarrassing the family. He stared at me, with a look that seemed to pierce right through me, as if daring me to tell the truth. I clenched my fists and lowered my head to hide the rage burning inside me. I wanted to scream everything at Jessica, tell her about the phone, about what Clara had confessed, but seeing the trusting eyes of my daughter as she turned to Arthur, I knew it would be useless. She smiled at him, placed a hand on his shoulder, and said, "Don't worry, Clara is just being difficult. I'll talk to her." Her words were like a knife that tore my heart apart. I knew, in that instant, that the door to justice had been slammed shut in our faces. A few days later, Arthur began his performance. He played the part of a father, a husband unjustly accused, perfectly. That night, as the dim light from an old chandelier spilled into the living room, Arthur gathered the whole family. He stood in the middle of the room, with a feigned calmness, but with a voice loaded with drama, like an actor on a stage. "I can't believe my wife's daughter hates me so much as to invent such a disgusting story to tarnish my reputation." He emphasized every word, his eyes glistening as if holding back tears. I was there, holding Clara, feeling my blood boil. He was talking about my granddaughter, about the pain she had endured, as if it were a mere childish fantasy. I wanted to scream, to run at him and unmask him, but the look on Jessica's face, my own daughter, stopped me. Jessica looked at me reproachfully, as if I were the one to blame for dragging the family into this nightmare. Then she turned to Clara, her voice trembling with rage. "Clara, how could you make up something so disgusting about your stepfather? He has loved and cared for you like his own daughter." Her words were like a knife twisting in my chest. Clara burst into tears, hid behind me, clinging to my clothes with her small hand, as if afraid she'd be torn away from me. I held her tight, feeling every shudder of her little body, and I yelled at my daughter, my voice broken with anger and pain. "The girl isn't lying, Jessica. You have to listen to her. You have to believe her." But Arthur, like a venomous snake, stepped forward immediately, placed a hand on Jessica's shoulder, and spoke with calculated sweetness. "You have to believe me, Jessica. I'm a teacher. Generations of students love me. I've done everything to love and care for Clara. I would never do something so dirty." He stressed the word dirty, as if trying to engrave in Jessica's mind that what Clara was saying was impossible. She burst into tears, hugged him tightly, and murmured, "I believe you, Arthur. I can't accept that my own daughter is capable of saying such cruel things." Her words were another stab straight to my heart. I stood there, motionless, feeling my own daughter turn her back on me and on Clara. Arthur looked at me, and for a moment, I saw a flash of triumph in his eyes. It was fleeting, almost imperceptible, before he put on a look of false indignation and suffering again. "Eleanor, if you and the girl continue to slander me, I'll have no choice but to contact a lawyer to defend my honor. I don't want this family to be destroyed, but I can't allow myself to be defamed like this." He said it calmly, but every word was an icy threat. I hugged Clara tighter, trying to contain the fury consuming me. He knew I had gone to the police station, that I was trying to expose him. The image of him chatting and laughing with Officer Riley in the station's parking lot appeared clearly in my mind, a cruel piece of the puzzle. It was Riley who had told him my whole story, and now Arthur was fighting back, turning me and Clara into liars. And Jessica unleashed her anger on Clara. Standing by the table, hands on her hips, she shouted, "From now on, you are forbidden to speak ill of your stepfather, Clara. If you do it again, I'll send you to live with your biological father." Her voice was sharp, as if she no longer recognized her own daughter. Clara buried her face on the table, sobbing, with hiccups that broke my soul. I held her against my chest, feeling her body tremble, and I looked Jessica straight in the eye, with a firm, hard tone. "If you ever speak to her like that again, I'll be the one to take Clara out of this house." My words echoed in the silence like a declaration of war. Jessica froze, her eyes wounded for an instant. But soon, fury covered everything. "Mom, how could you do this to me?" she cried, tears streaming down her cheeks. Arthur stood with his arms crossed in the corner of the room, not saying a word, but his gaze was as cold as ice, watching my granddaughter and me as if we were intruders in our own home. He didn't need to speak. His silence was enough to impose his power. I squeezed Clara's hand tightly. I took her to her room, trying to contain the rage and pain that burned inside me. That night I stayed by her side, listening to every shaky breath the girl took, and I knew I couldn't let things stay this way. I had failed to protect Clara from Kevin, her own father, and now I couldn't let Arthur continue to sow fear in my granddaughter. A few days later, I made the decision to act. I couldn't allow Clara to live one more minute in that house, where every corner hid an invisible threat. In silence, I packed a few of my and Clara's clothes into an old cloth bag, folding each shirt carefully, as if I were packing up my entire life. I did it without making a sound, while the whole house slept. Every little noise, from the zipping of the bag to the creak of the floorboards, made my heart clench with fear, terrified that Arthur would wake up and discover us. One morning, before the sun had risen, I took Clara by the hand, and we quietly left the house where I had lived my whole life. The heavy wooden door closed behind us, and I felt as if a part of my heart had broken off. That house, where Jessica's laughter once echoed when she was a child, where my husband and I raised our children, was now nothing more than a cage filled with darkness. Clara squeezed my hand tightly, saying nothing, but her eyes asked me, "Grandma, where are we going?" I smiled at her, trying to hide my pain. "I'm going to find a safe place for you, Clara. As long as you have me, you won't have to be afraid." We rented a small, damp room near the town church. The room only had a twin bed, an old wooden table, and a small window that looked out onto the dirt road. The musty smell from the walls and the church bells ringing every hour were all we had. But I didn't care. As long as Clara was safe, I was willing to give up everything. I went back to selling pies at the market, under the scorching sun or the cold rain, every morning. Clara was enrolled in another school, where no one knew our story. But a small town doesn't forgive those who break its false peace. The neighbors began to whisper, to cast looks of suspicion and contempt. That Eleanor is old and still looking for trouble, they would whisper behind my back. She just wants to tarnish Professor Vance's name to ruin her daughter's life. What a shame. I tried to ignore the gossip, but every word was like a knife twisting in my dignity. I had lived my whole life in Oakhaven. I had raised my children there. I had shared my pies with neighbors in hard times. And yet, now Clara and I were seen as outsiders, as troublemakers. But what hurt the most was Jessica. One afternoon, she came to the room where we were staying. She stood at the door, crying and begging. "Mom, how could you tear us apart like this? How can you believe a child? Arthur is a good man, can't you see that?" Her face was gaunt, her eyes swollen from crying, but her voice was full of anger. I stayed inside, holding Clara tight as she trembled, and refused to open the door. "Jessica, you don't understand," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm doing this for Clara, because she needs to be safe." But she just shook her head and shouted, "You've ruined everything." Then she left, leaving me with my heart in pieces. Meanwhile, Arthur continued teaching every day with complete tranquility. He continued to wear his crisp white shirt, continued to smile at students and parents, as if nothing had happened. I heard he was even praised as an example of a man who had endured many injustices, but still remained dedicated to teaching. Every time I heard those words, it felt like salt being poured on my wound. He had won, at least for now. He had managed to turn Clara and me into the town outcasts, while he continued with his perfect facade. But strangely, despite being isolated, despite having to live in a cramped rental room, I felt a strange lightness. Every night, when Clara slept soundly beside me, without startling from nightmares, I knew I had done the right thing. At least the girl no longer had to live under the same roof as that demon disguised as a man. I would hold her, quietly sing the old lullaby, and pray, as I always did, asking God for the strength to keep going. The days in that little room near the church passed slowly, as if time itself wanted to test my patience. Every morning I woke up early, prepared my basket of pies, and set up on the market corner, where the prying eyes and whispers of the neighbors never ceased. But I no longer cared. As long as Clara was safe, I could endure any gossip. The girl started going to a new school, smaller and farther away, but I saw how, little by little, her eyes regained their sparkle, how her shy smile returned when she talked about her new friends. One day, while I was at the market corner wrapping steaming pies for customers, the murmurs began to spread. At first, they were just loose phrases that slipped through the noise of the place. "That Professor Vance, it seems he's not what everyone thinks," a vegetable seller muttered to her colleague. "My daughter says he often keeps her after class, and he looks at her in a very strange way." I froze, my hands still on the pie crust, my heart pounding in my chest. Those words were pieces that fit with the suspicion that had tormented me for months, but I didn't dare get my hopes up. Arthur, with his prestige and his skill, had built a wall that was too solid. Who would believe those rumors when the whole town had worshipped him like a hero? One afternoon, while I was cleaning the floor of our room, I heard a few timid knocks on the door. When I opened it, I saw a middle-aged woman with a worried expression standing in the doorway. It was Sharon Peterson, the mother of a student at Arthur's school. She lowered her voice, as if afraid someone would hear her. "Mrs. Eleanor, I don't think you made anything up. My daughter, Emily, told me that Professor Vance makes her stay alone after class, saying it's to help him grade papers. But she says he gets too close to her, and it scares her." Sharon's voice trembled, her eyes filled with anxiety. A chill ran down my spine, but I tried to stay calm. I took her hand and said, "Sharon, you need proof. Otherwise, he'll deny everything." She nodded, with tears in her eyes, and promised to find a way to protect her daughter. A few weeks later, the whole town was shaken. Another parent, a man named Paul, had placed a hidden camera in the school hallway after his daughter told him the same thing. The video he got spread quickly among the parent groups, like a flame in the dead of night. I was in my room, with the old phone a generous neighbor had lent me, my hand trembling as I opened the file. The image was blurry but unmistakable. Arthur, in his usual white shirt, trying to drag a girl into a corner of the hallway, his hand on her shoulder, whispering something to her. The girl, terrified, broke free and ran off. Rage and sorrow for Clara overwhelmed me. My granddaughter had endured all that alone for so long, while the whole town applauded the man who had hurt her. In just a few days, like a domino effect, several more female students began to find their courage and speak out. One girl told how Arthur used to call her to his office to ask about homework, but his gaze made her shudder. Another, just 11 years old, said that he had once touched her hand and laughed in a strange way. Each testimony was a hammer blow that tore down the wall of lies Arthur had built for so long. The school could no longer turn a blind eye. They suspended him immediately, and the police, this time, opened a new, much more serious investigation. Officer Riley, with his arrogant smile, was gone, replaced by a team of investigators from the city, with sharp questions and an unforgiving tone. That afternoon, I sat in the rental room and turned on the old television the landlady had lent me. On the local news, they mentioned Arthur's name with the headline, "Teacher accused of inappropriate conduct with students." Clara, who was next to me, upon hearing her stepfather's name, shot her head up, her eyes wide. Then she threw herself into my arms. She hugged me tightly, sobbing, "Grandma, they believe me now, right?" I held her, tears rolling down my wrinkled cheeks. For the first time in many dark months, I saw a light at the end of the tunnel. "Yes, my love," I whispered with a broken voice. "I told you. The truth always finds a way to come out." But my joy was overshadowed by the pain for Jessica. My daughter was completely devastated. Neighbors told me she had withered away, that she was gaunt, her eyes always swollen from crying. Jessica clung to the belief that her husband was innocent. She went from house to house, pleading through her tears. "Don't hurt Arthur. He's a good man. He couldn't have done that." But the wave of truth was already too strong, and no one believed her anymore. Those who had once celebrated her wedding now looked at her with a mixture of pity and contempt. On the day of the trial, all of Oak Haven seemed to be buzzing. The courtroom was packed, a constant murmur running through it like a wave. Outside, local journalists, parents, and students gathered, holding up handwritten signs, "Justice for the victims," and "The guilty must pay." I was there, in the midst of the crowd, feeling my heart tighten in my chest. All those months of anguish, doubt, and pain had led me to this moment, the moment when the truth would come to light. But I didn't want Clara to witness it. I didn't want her to face Arthur again, the man who had sown terror in her childhood. I took her by the hand and led her to the park near the courthouse, where Evelyn was waiting for us. "Grandma is just going inside for a little while, Clara," I whispered, stroking her hair. "You stay here with Aunt Evelyn. Play a little, okay?" Clara nodded, her big eyes looking at me, full of trust. I smiled at her, though my heart was heavy as I walked away. Upon entering the courtroom, a suffocating atmosphere filled the air. The old wooden benches were full, and the ceiling fan hummed, trying in vain to dispel the tension. I found a seat towards the back, trying to go unnoticed among the people. And then I saw him. Arthur, standing in the defendant's box, clean-shaven, in a crisp white shirt, as if still trying to maintain the facade of a respectable teacher. But his restless, nervous eyes gave him away. He was no longer the man the whole town had once admired. He was just someone desperate to hide his crimes. The trial began. Each witness was called, and each statement was like a hammer blow shattering the mask of respectability Arthur had so carefully constructed. A girl, only 12 years old, stood before the court, her voice trembling as she recounted how Arthur would keep her after class, with a look that made her afraid. Another parent presented the video from the hallway camera. The image was blurry but clear enough to make your blood run cold. Arthur dragging a student into a corner, his hand on the girl's shoulder, murmuring words no one wanted to hear. Then came the disgusting messages found on his phone, not the one I had found under Clara's bed, but another one, seized by the police during the investigation. Those messages, sent to several female students, were filled with sick words that made the entire courtroom shudder. I sat there, my fists clenched, feeling both rage and pain. Clara, my granddaughter, had endured all this alone, while I remained blind, believing Arthur was a good man. I turned towards the back row, where Jessica was sitting on the floor, covering her face and crying silently. My daughter was a wreck. She was gaunt, with sunken eyes as if all the life had been drained from her. She no longer defended Arthur, no longer shouted as she had in the previous days, but in her gaze there was still immense pain, as if she couldn't accept the truth. I wanted to run to her, to tell her that her mother still loved her, but I knew it wasn't the right time. Jessica needed time to face her own collapse, to accept that her blindness had led her to turn her back on her daughter and her own mother. The judge, a middle-aged woman with a stern look, listened to every testimony. When the prosecutor finished her closing statement, the atmosphere in the room was suspended. The final sentence was handed down: several years in prison for the crimes Arthur had committed. He bowed his head, without saying a word, as the police led him away. His reputation, his career, everything he once had, turned to dust in a matter of hours. Outside, applause erupted from the crowd in front of the courthouse, but I didn't feel joy, only relief, as if a 1,000-pound rock had been lifted from my chest. Leaving the courthouse, I lifted my face to the blue sky and took a deep breath. The air had never felt so pure, as if the whole world had been cleansed after a storm. Across the street, in the park, Clara saw me from a distance. The girl ran towards me, her little feet skipping along the dirt path, and she hugged me tightly, whispering, "Grandma, from now on, I'm going to sleep peacefully. I won't see that man in my room anymore." Her voice was clear, full of hope, and for the first time in so many months, I saw a radiant smile on her face. I burst into tears, holding Clara against my chest, as tears rolled down my wrinkled cheeks. "That's right, my love," I said with a choked voice. "From now on, there will only be happy dreams." We stood there, in the middle of the small park, under the shade of an oak tree that swayed in the wind. I felt a peace I thought I had lost forever, but that joy wasn't complete, because I knew that Jessica, my daughter, was paying the price for her blindness. I didn't go looking for her. I heard from neighbors that she had left town, without telling anyone, just packed her things in silence and disappeared. A part of me ached, wanted to run after her, hug her, and tell her that her mother was still here, waiting for her. But I knew Jessica needed time to heal, to confront the truth that the man she loved had betrayed everyone. Clara and I returned to the small rental room, which had now become our home. Every night, I would sit by her side and tell her stories from my youth, of the days when her mother and I would run through the apple orchard. Clara began to laugh more, to sing the nursery rhymes I had taught her again. I still went to the market corner every morning to sell pies, but now the suspicious glares were fewer. Some neighbors, the same ones who had turned their backs on me before, began to stop by to apologize for not believing me. Sharon, Emily's mom, even brought me a basket of fresh apples and said, "Eleanor, thanks to you, my daughter is safe. Thank you." "I don't blame you," I'd say. "I know that in a small town like Oakhaven, the truth sometimes needs time to break through the lies." I only hurt for Jessica. After what happened, she became the target of criticism, from both the town and social media, for being so blind in love and not seeing her daughter's suffering. And to this day, it remains a thorn in my heart. But when I look at Clara, when I see her grow every day with an ever brighter smile, I understand that my greatest happiness now is being by her side, watching her grow up in safety and love, under a sky with no shadows. I have lived long enough to understand something. Demons disguised as people, no matter how well they hide, will sooner or later pay for their crimes. They can deceive an entire town, buy off the powerful, even make a family turn its back on a child. But the truth never disappears. My granddaughter had to endure a horror that few would dare to believe. And the most valuable lesson I learned after all this is this: never underestimate a child's fear. Their silent cry can be a desperate scream for help. And it is our responsibility to listen to them, to protect them until the very end. I want everyone to understand that justice may be slow, but it always arrives, and whoever causes pain to a child will, sooner or later, have to face the consequences. So, don't turn your back, don't stay silent, and never minimize a child's pain, because that silence can destroy an entire childhood. The story you have just heard has had names and places changed to protect the identities of those involved. We don't tell it to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and stop to reflect. How many mothers might be suffering in silence inside their own homes? I truly wonder, if you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you choose to stay silent to keep the peace? Or would you have the courage to face everything to reclaim your voice? I want to know your opinion, because every story can become a candle that lights the way for someone else. God always blesses, and I am sure that courage will lead us to better days. For now, on the end screen, I will leave 2 of the channel's most beloved stories. I know they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.